Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to help you understand what's happening in the war in Ukraine. My goal is to give you context so that you can understand it, explain it to others, be equipped to be able to help others process this as well. So every week I try to provide a weekly update so that you can understand the major stories. And I also try to show you some of the stories that you might have missed along the way. So I'm going to do that. 2 stories per day from Monday, January 8th until yesterday, which is Sunday. So I go over week. Okay, last Monday, the big story that we were talking about was how RT was claiming that Ukraine had lost 500,000 troops, according to the ex-prosecutor general. Now, I did a story about that. I did a video about that. And then I did a second one because some of your viewer comments were awesome, where you were pointing out how, like, I was just kind of ripping that article up. And then in the second one, I talked about your comments where, yeah, these are replacements that so that they can rotate in and out. That doesn't mean that 500,000 were killed on the battlefield, which is what RT was trying to claim. That same day, there was another big story about how Ukraine destroyed a rail bridge connecting occupied Mariupol to Russia. It wasn't a fully functioning bridge, but it was still going to hamper their efforts to be able to prosecute the war by being able to supply that way. The story that we didn't talk about was how Moscow accidentally bombed Russian-occupied Luhansk region, and that kind of thing has happened before. Okay, Tuesday, 9 January, there were more than 1,000 Ukrainian towns that lost power due to extreme weather. And the silver lining to the bad weather was that it was harder for missiles to come and strike Ukraine. Nevertheless, on the same day, drones hit a Russian oil facility more than 130 miles from Ukraine, so they were still working at it. The story that was overlooked that day, and I might even still do a video about this, was Ukraine contracts Shablia robotic turrets for the first time. These are machine guns that are essentially robotic. There's no human being there controlling it, but you can control it like a drone with a machine gun. So you can place the turrets where you want to. And again, these drones are the wave of the future. I keep saying it. It's like seeing tanks in World War I and saying, you know, the next big war, tanks are going to be everywhere. It's that kind of thing. Okay, Wednesday, 10 January. So the big story there was Ukraine as a test site for North Korean missiles, according to South Korea. Now, Ukraine has used these ballistic missiles that they got from South Korea, and I learned a lot about this. Regular missiles, the hypersonic or the other missiles, tend to go in a straighter pattern. Ballistic tend to go up, and I learned this from you viewers as well, and then I had to go research it. Ballistic missiles go up, and then they drop down, and because they go up so high, and when they drop down, they separate, they're harder to shoot down. And so this was a big thing. I initially mocked the missiles from North Korea. Really? Is that where we are? But no. They were actually harder to shoot down for some reason because of the smaller target. Okay, but the stories that you might have missed were 3 Russian ships on duty in the Black and Azov Seas, caliber missile carriers, withdrawn to the Mediterranean. Now, I don't know if that was a regular rotation or if they withdrew them to get them out of Dodge or exactly what, but that's pretty significant. Ukraine also destroyed Russian air defenses in Crimea layer by layer. That's radar and then air defenses and other things along these lines. They're still coming for Crimea. Thursday, 11 January. So there were a couple of stories and they were all kind of largely equal. There wasn't like a missing or hidden story here. Ukraine's building barricades and bridges, digs trenches and focus its shift to defense and defensive posture. And it's doing that. It relieves some of its forces while it's on the defensive, as well as now, you want to get back on offensive, I get that, but they're doing it in a different way. And I covered this in my 3 big stories, I believe, where I was talking about how, like, they're not laying mines like the Russians are laying mines. And the reason that they're not is because they're saying, well, this is our land. We don't want to mine it. The Russians are also claiming that that's their land, and yet they're heavily mining it. You see the difference in the mentality? Okay, the other stories were deported Ukrainian children who were sent to survival training with the Belarusian military, or how Russian officials and their collaborators spirited away Ukraine's children. Those are terrible stories, but they're all pretty big that day. Friday, 12 January, the UK pledges thousands of military drones for Ukraine in a historic security deal. The security deal is somewhat similar to the American security pledge to Israel. I mean, this is big, right? So that's the big story for the day. The smaller story that you might not have seen is that the SBU detained at the border a Kherson ex-official who helped occupiers deport Ukrainian children. Now I'm going to read from the story, so please bear with me for a moment. During the occupation of the regional center, she became a member of the management team of the seized medical institution and handed over 24 ambulance vehicles to the invaders. To do this, she personally signed the corresponding order to make the procedure seem legal. It said the defendant helped the occupiers to conduct the mass deportation of Ukrainian children. They were taken in ambulances from Kherson to Crimea and then to the Russian Federation. Thus, the illegal removal of minors was carried out under the guise of moving medical special transport, and they also handed over the ambulances over to the Russians as well. So, good that they caught her. Okay, Saturday, 13 January. The big story was in Ukraine, France's new foreign minister telling Kyiv, our determination is intact. Like, there's been a lot of circulating about how like Western support is waning, so the UK is stepping up. Germany has stepped up in a big way with money. UK just with money recently, as well as Sunak there. The French foreign minister is there. I see that Western powers are seeing that it seems like it's waning, so they're stepping into that breach. The story that you might not have seen unless you were watching my three big stories was how in the ISW, Ukraine had shot down missiles with electronic warfare countermeasures. Now, they might have been doing that before, but this was the first time that I saw that the ISW saying, yeah, they're doing it with that. Not just drones, missiles are being shot down. Now, not destroyed in the air, but diverted and knocked down. So that's a pretty significant step forward. And to my mind, that's something to keep watching, because if Ukraine can divert these missiles in a meaningful way, Russia really doesn't have anything going on. I mean, they're not doing anything on the counteroffensive line. Really, what they're trying to do is do damage with these missiles. Okay, at any rate, Sunday, 14 January, Zelensky heads to Davos for a peace formula talk. That was the big story. And there were 83 nations there. That was up from 66 the year before. And they were talking about the 10-point plan, working in 10 different groups about each of the 10 points. Russia wasn't there, but it wasn't about actually agreeing with Russia about anything. It was about working on a strategy with 83 different nations. Good on Africa, who had more than a dozen nations there represented. So that needs to be shorn up as well. And more countries join that. Now, that big story was just displaced by the story that they shot down an A-50 and an Il-22 over the Sea of Azov. Now, that was the best day in for Ukrainian aviation, or the worst day for Russian aviation, I should say, since the war began. It was a huge loss. And if you don't understand why, I just did a video, I just dropped that. Please go look at that video. Okay, the story that you might have missed was that Ukraine is dramatically expanding its domestic arms production. They're working towards self-sufficiency, and they're moving there in a heavy, hot, fast way. They are just beating down that trail. This was right out of the ISW, and I think that's the way that they have to be in order to be able to prosecute the war without strings to the weapons that are being given to it, so that NATO doesn't get involved with a hot war with Russia. Okay, those are the articles or the stories that you needed to hear from this past week. Thank you for your time. Thank you. If you haven't subscribed to me, please make sure that you do so you can keep current. Thank you for the likes, shares, subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.